I don't care if Gen Z likes me. She writes about Tucker Carlson's interview a while back with Nick Fuentes. I recently cut a couple clips from Tucker Carlson's interview with Nick Fuentes, originally published last October, and something odd struck me with the body language. Here was a man who once commanded an audience of 5 million adults on the biggest show in cable news, sitting across from a 20-something shock jock, channeling the energy of a guy trying to impress his son's friends. See how cool I am? See how I'm not afraid to go there? For example, an hour and a half into the conversation, Carlson paused to justify why he'd agreed to do it at all. Quote, everyone is going to be like, you're a Nazi just like Fuentes, but I don't think Fuentes is going away. He's bigger than ever. He also told Fuentes that Fuentes, was, quote, more talented than I am for sure as a talker, unquote. Earlier, when Fuentes explained that he became radicalized on race, his quote, by listening to Fox News host Mark Levin, Tucker responded, amazing. When Fuentes mentioned he admires Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, Carlson told him they would circle back. He never did. Cultural commentator John Gabriel put it well on X at the time. Jon Stewart embracing Zoran, Tucker embracing Nick, two aging hosts desperate to impress the young and scared of being left behind. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what explains the descent into madness. My commentary, back to Fatesi, that's the dynamic. You start reading the room instead of saying what's true. Your audience gets younger, more online, more radicalized, and instead of pushing back with the credibility you spent decades building, you chase them. Every take gets a little edgier. Every interview pushes a little further. You tell yourself you're being brave. Really, you're performing for an algorithm and a demographic that will forget your name the moment someone edgier comes along. This is the battle playing out across the media right now. Legacy turned new media stars watch their Fox News audience age, clinging to relevance. They watch younger, ever more contrarian pundits and podcasters suck up all the energy and the eyeballs. The pick-me desperation is palpable. Maybe it's the Gen X in me, and I'm a Gen Xer too, like Bridget. But I don't care if the coveted 18 to 34-year-old demographic likes me because they don't know much yet. They think they do. They've grown up online with supercomputers in their pockets, cameras in their faces, and gentle parenting. And yes, it's a completely normal function of being in your 20s to think you know everything. In that sense, they're just like every generation before them. In every other way, they're not. I'm not looking to the youth for wisdom, and I don't particularly care if they look to me for it. Yeah, I like that take. And I don't know if it explains Tucker Carlson. You know, I'm not doing armchair psychoanalysis here. Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly or others who are making curious choices these days, offering even more curious arguments. But I think there's something there. And to that point, Tucker Carlson's latest hot take on Trump and the Middle East.
Why can't this president or any president say no to Israel? And we have a right to know why. It's not just because we love Israel and it's the only democracy in the Middle East. And if it is, then our leaders are dumber than we thought they were. But it's probably not that. Because they understand perfectly well how bad this is for the U.S. And there are, believe it or not, a lot of people in the White House who care about the United States. People with power in the White House. They're not all, whatever you think they are, zombies doing Bibi's bidding. Some of them can see very clearly where this is heading. It's heading toward a nuclear strike by Israel on Iran. That's obvious.
Yeah, just like it was obvious that Trump was going to initiate a nuclear strike against Iran, which is what Tucker argued just a couple of days ago. Just like it's obvious that there's something else going on here. What's going on? With respect to Trump, perhaps something that is biblical, like he's the Antichrist, which is something Tucker Carlson also intimated a couple of days ago.
What are we doing? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's becoming a punchline. And interestingly, I mean, of course, there have been disagreement, public ones, reported ones, between Bibi and Trump, both during Israel's war against Hamas, as well as in the early weeks of this campaign against Iran. Trump publicly upset about Israel striking oil refinery and saying, don't do that, and essentially Bibi agreeing. And there was this, the issue about whether or not there was some misunderstanding, quote unquote, as J.D. Vance characterized it, by the Iranians, believing that Lebanon was included in the ceasefire, and it's not included. That's a decision for Israel to make vis-a-vis Hezbollah, vis-a-vis Iran, separate and distinct from what the United States is demanding. Although there has been indications that if the Trump administration wants Bibi to stop the strikes against Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, he would be open to that. And Vance took it a step further on the tarmac in Budapest.
Look, if Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered over Lebanon, which has nothing to do with them and which the United States never once said was part of the ceasefire, that's ultimately their choice. We think that would be dumb, but that's their choice.
Mr. Vice.
Noah Rothman is a senior writer at National Review and the author of the forthcoming Blood and Progress, a century of left-wing violence in America. Noah, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to address this. You know, I've been watching and reading a lot of what Federal District Court Judge Roy Altman has been writing of late. Very interesting, thoughtful guy, and I'm just starting to get into his book Israel on Trial, and I've come to agree with him that this stuff that's happening, Tucker and Megyn Kelly and others. It's not about their personalities, but it's about the audience, and it's about what it represents in terms of appeal to a larger audience, particularly of young people, as Bridget Fatazzi was writing about. And I think this needs to be confronted straight away. And so that's what I want to do, at least in part, and that's what I'll have you do as well.
I appreciate that. I don't really think Tucker is worth responding to much these days, but I'll give it a go because he's so much smarter than that. I can only conclude that he thinks you're stupid, so he can get one over on you. The notion that all presidents have deferred obsequiously to Israel is laughably false. I mean, it's just impossibly dumb. During the Gulf War, George H.W. Bush leaned on Israel to absorb Scud missile strikes from Saddam Hussein's regime and not respond, including unconventional weapons. In George W. Bush's administration, Israel lobbied against the Iraq War, saying we should go after Iran. They were ignored. Israel entered Lebanon, southern Lebanon, in 2006. Condoleezza Rice gave them about 20 days to wrap up operations or withdraw U.S. support. This was public. All this is publicly reported. Then you can go into the Democratic administrations. Barack Obama was inordinately hostile to Israel, did everything it could to frustrate its domestic initiatives, voted against it in the United Nations, withdrew America's support for vetoing Security Council resolutions that target Israel, which are disproportionate, wildly disproportionate in that obnoxious institution. And Joe Biden frustrated the campaign against Hamas in every possible way, up to and including preventing Israel for weeks from entering Khan Yunis, where when Israel eventually went in, they managed to capture the head of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, or actually eliminate him, as it were. So there's a long history of the United States keeping an arm's-length relationship with Israel in deference to many things, including international prejudices, but also domestic prejudices. This administration has upended all that. And I mean only in this term, too. The first term, you could say the administration was cagey as well. The Abraham Accords were a sub rosa initiative. They weren't even something that you were aware of until 2019. It was all very covert because it was so sensitive. But this administration has embraced Israel and its relationship with Israel as the most capable military ally in the United States, arsenal here. And that's really a departure from historical norms. And I know Tucker Carlson knows that. He just thinks you probably don't, so he can get one over on you. It's really obnoxious behavior.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, it's bigger than Tucker Carlson here. I mean, the concern is, and I heard this from a friend of mine who's very bright, a friend of mine's daughter who's very bright. It's the same. These names do pop up. I mean, I didn't really pay much attention to Nick Fuentes until she said something. Do you pay to what about Nick Fuentes? We were talking about different podcasters and personalities. I'm like, no, that guy's a crank. And she's like, no, she disagreed with me. And I was a bit stunned because just in terms of what was recounted by Bridget Fatazzi in her piece at the Free Press is enough for someone who is sensible to dismiss Nick Fuentes as just that. But that's not what is happening. And so it is concerning, including because it's happening with otherwise young conservatives who are, for example, young men who are rediscovering faith and who are being attracted to Christianity and Catholicism, which of course is something I support. So I don't want to leave this to be like some fight between Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly on the one hand and Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro on the other hand. I think that is not nearly exhaustive enough.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And one of the reasons why I've spent the last 10 years being vocally leery of the rise of populist sentiments in America is in part because there is an attendant attitude to those sentiments that is favorable towards, if not, inculcating a persecution complex. The notion being that all that is your worldly due has been stolen from you by some ill-defined yet omniscient and omnipresent cabal of influential elites. We can't really identify who they are, but they're malign and they're out there and they're taking that which is your due in life, and you have to take it back. This is paranoid sentiments, and that kind of paranoia is not necessarily adjacent to, but it is very favorable towards anti-Semitic attitudes. Because who is the elite cabal throughout all of history who's been doing this to you? It doesn't take long for you to draw that conclusion. And we've seen commensurately a rise of anti-Semitic attitudes on the left and the right, many of whom have been attracted to progressive populist or right-wing populist philosophies. And I don't think that I do think there's a connection you can draw there. I don't think the two phenomena are separable. And it manifests in certain ways. Some of them are less malign than others. I think you can have disagreements about the extent to which tethering America's relationship to Israel is beneficial for our strategic initiatives, or their strategic initiatives for that matter. All that stuff can be on the table. But what the Tucker Carlsons of the world are doing is introducing the notion that there is a much more grand plot involved here, and a malign plot that involves a lot of moving parts, but the ultimate goal is to sap the United States of sovereignty, sap the United States of agency and initiative. And at a micro level, that's the macro level, but at the micro level, it's taking away your initiative, your sovereignty, your capacity to navigate your own life and make your own decisions. And it's a toxic philosophy. It's not true, but it's the sort of thing that can really whip you up and imbue you with this righteous notion that you are an aggrieved party fighting for your rights, for that which is your due. It's quite dangerous.
Well, and it's interesting you make that connect because that's exactly what Tucker Carlson has been doing. Recently, and we discussed it on this program, he talked about essentially the sunsetting of American hegemony, and we're going to have to learn how to share power with the Chinese Communist Party. Sort of conceding conceding the American exceptionalism posture that conservatives normally take, and just throwing up our hands that this whole experiment is effectively over, and we're going to have to peacefully coexist with the totalitarians in Beijing.
Well, that's the other thing, right? For whatever you want to say about the Iran war, which is by no means over, one thing it has demonstrated pretty clearly is that the folks in the right and the left who have been arguing that the United States is a spent force are going to have a lot of data points to refute over the next couple of months, and it's going to be pretty difficult. The United States is not a spent force. It does not lack the will or the resolve to pursue its objectives abroad with vigor, and it certainly doesn't lack the means. So the argument that we are this hollowed out, morally defunct, ethically and spiritually enervated. All this stuff that they've been retailing just doesn't really match the reality on the ground, but it's their line, and it's what gives them authority and power. It's the element of the people who say you can't trust anybody else but me. Anybody who tells you can't trust anything but me is a con artist, is a carnival barker, and that is their shtick. That just doesn't seem to match to me what we're seeing on the ground, what we're seeing from this administration or past administrations, and certainly not from the Americans in civilian and military roles who are executing with incredible aplomb America's initiatives abroad. We should have pride in all this stuff, and they don't want you to. They want you to be embarrassed by it, and I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, there's, look, there's no shortage of Harold Hills in the, the quote-unquote conservative ranks, and we've seen them come. I mean, certainly my adulthood, seen them come and go a lot, so I don't know why people are surprised at the prospect that that element exists within our ranks, too. I wanted to get to Iran more specifically, and this... The state of, which is something we've been discussing, we did with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser and Michael Rubin yesterday, the state of the dissidents within that are in country. James Freeman writing in the Wall Street Journal about the crackdown on dissidents that's happening under whatever constitutes the current leadership in Tehran. 6 convicted members of the banned opposition group, the People's Mujahideen of Iran, and a dual Iranian Swedish citizen have been convicted of charges of spying for Israel, affiliating with a banned party, and so on and so forth, and other such examples of the crackdowns that are happening, with sort of the idea that we need to be funneling munitions to these dissidents to allow them to protect themselves and perhaps to be prepared to seize an opportunity that may present itself. And I just wonder, because we just haven't seen a lot of scholarship on this topic. Are there identified dissident organizations like this People's Mujahideen of Iran that the administration should be doing more to support in this moment, running parallel tracks here, even as you're at the negotiating table?
Well, I'm no expert on the dissident networks on the ground inside Iran, nor am I privy to a lot of the intelligence that I shouldn't be privy to. I mean, the administration, the president came out and said yesterday, or a couple of days ago, that we were funneling weapons to dissident elements inside Iran, and then they were lifted by the Kurds. I mean, this is the sort of thing that he probably should not have said publicly, but at least we know that the initiatives are ongoing. We do know that there's very few organized opposition organizations inside Iran. They're systematically destroyed by this regime. When we see elements rise against this regime, as we have seen with metronomic regularity over the course of this century, 2001, 2009, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2022, 2025, that's going to happen again. And when it happens again, it will confront a regime that lacks a lot of the terror apparatus that it had previously, which is desirable. But these aren't organized elements. These are just street protests, and all of them have a different vision for what a post-Islamic Republic of Iran future looks like, which is why we don't want to deal with that now. We want to keep everybody on the same page. Just get rid of the regime, and we'll talk about what happens after. But there are also groups like the MEK, which is like a quasi-socialist militia element within the Kurdish population, and they're probably more trouble than they're worth. There's restive elements in Baluchistan, which neighbors Pakistan, and they consistently rise up against this regime. There are minority Azeris, but the Persian element is the core element of this regime. And that's the one that you would want to see crack in order to really break the regime's hold, and that will be elite on elite violence. We haven't touched the Iranian army. The the IRGC is hollowed out. The political and clerisy has been hollowed out. But the leadership class of the army, the Artesh, has not been touched either by the United States or Israel, and that's intentional. The design here is to ensure that this armed element, which is underfunded compared to the IRGC, but nevertheless big and something with some vestigial attachment to the pre-Islamic Revolution Republic, we want that to break with the IRGC and facilitate this elite break that would really break the regime. That's the design. Whether that works or not, who knows? It's kind of a Rube Goldberg device, so I wouldn't bet on it necessarily. But it is the plan, and it is a plan that we've been working towards. There's a lot of folks who are saying there's no plan. The president went into this willy-nilly, and it wasn't exigency. There wasn't an 8 months buildup to this thing like the Iraq War. There were these violent protests. They slaughtered 40,000 people in the streets. The regime had never been weaker since 1979. We had an opportunity, and we went for it with the army that we had into place at the time. Maybe not suboptimal, perhaps. But that was the plan, and the plan is being executed right now to my satisfaction. I do think the ceasefire was a worthwhile initiative. because Iran's terms changed. Ours did not. We were committing to restrikes on targets, which means we're just making the rubble bounce, suggestive that we've already reached our target goals. So I thought it was worthwhile to pursue it. But it has become a one-way ceasefire here. The Strait, which was their only point of leverage, which they put on the table, by the way, and was one of the reasons why I thought it was worthwhile, is still functionally closed. Iran is attempting to drag Lebanon now into this, and Hezbollah, which was not part of the initial agreement. Well, they're just playing games, as they always do. And I think Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and J.D. Vance, when they go to Islamabad, they're going to want to give it a shot, but they should really be prepared to walk. And because we're seeing more U.S. elements introduced into the region and reporting from Der Spiegel this morning that they're trying to get Europe involved, I think they will.
Noah Rothman, senior writer, National Review, author of the forthcoming book, Blood and Progress, A Century of Left-Wing Violence in America. Noah, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joins us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hey, business owners, is your business and money in good hands? Does your bank invest in your success? Hi, Mike Gallagher here, letting you know that when you need a relationship bank,